One of the biggest challenges for technical professionals, architects, engineers, scientists who want to become leaders is knowing when to get into the weeds and the details, but when to step back and delegate and get out of the weeds. It's a very, very difficult balance to try to hold in your career to become a great leader. But in this week's episode of the Civil Engineering CEO, I'm thrilled to have with me John Sartor. John is a licensed professional engineer, and he's also the president and CEO of PS&S, a fast-growing multidiscipline consulting firm. And John is really good at this balance. He really knows when he needs to get in the weeds on an idea and help push it forward, or when he needs to step back and let other people on his team run with it. And so I talked to him a lot about that today, but he also gives us some insight as to some of the key skills that technical professionals in the consulting world need to build to be successful. So I'm thrilled to have the conversation today with John Sartor. And before I jump in with John, a quick word from our sponsor for the episode, Pennoni. Since Pennoni's founding more than 5 decades ago, their clients trust Pennoni's commitment to elevating the impact of projects in the communities they serve. By partnering with their clients, they establish relationships that create trust and longevity. Pennoni approaches the start of every project as the beginning of a collaboration. With the rapid change in technology, Pennoni's clients know they are getting innovative methods in delivering quality services for smart, sustainable, and resilient solutions. Pennoni is relentless in their aim to bring fresh perspective and new technologies. Pennoni measures achievement in innovation, efficiency, and excellence. Its milestones are bigger than any one project, and every project affects the community, no matter how large or small. For more information, visit Pennoni.com. That's Pennoni.com. All right, now I'd like to welcome my guest for today's episode, John Sartor. John is the president and chief executive officer of PS&S. He's also a licensed professional engineer. John, welcome to the Civil Engineering CEO.
Thank you. I appreciate having me today.
No, I'm excited to have you. John and I have gotten the chance to work together quite a bit over the last couple of years, done some work with PS&S, and he's really passionate about, not just growing his company, but growing his people. And that's one of the reasons that I wanted to have him on the show today. So John, just to kick us off, just tell us about PS&S, your background, the services you offer, where you're
Absolutely.
located.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. So PS&S, we're actually a multidiscipline architecture, engineering, environmental, and surveying firm. So our major disciplines, we have pretty much all the full gamut of both vertical as well as horizontal engineering. We have about 300 people right now based in 11 locations, predominantly here in the tri-state area, but we've also recently opened up offices in Texas, North Carolina, looking at geographic expansion going forward to help grow the firm.
Awesome. Yeah, definitely lots of growth going on. And that kind of takes me to where I want to start with you, John. I know in talking with a lot of leaders, working with a lot of leaders, one of the things that's always challenging, especially as a firm is growing, is what I see in terms of some of the mistakes that people make is either they have a really good idea as like a visionary leader, but they don't know how to drill it down to the ground, or they tend to be on the ground so much, like in the details, that they kind of lose track of some of the other bigger picture things they need to focus on. But from my work with you, you seem to have a pretty good balance in that you have some ideas that you bring to the table and you kind of know what needs to happen for them to get done, but you're also not afraid to say, hey, it's not me that's got to get this done. It's, these 3 or 4 or 5 people, I need to pull them in and get them going. I'm just curious as to how you develop that balance, because I know it's really important.
No, absolutely. It's funny. I tell people I don't have an MBA. I didn't go to business school. I have multiple master's degrees, but it's all like, environmental and geotechnical and construction management. And you learn some along the way, but most of it's been through my experiences. For us, luckily, we were actually owned by a public company for about 9 years, PS&S, from 2000 to 2009. And frankly, they put a lot of good practice in place that we adopted and that we've kept to this day. And so I think when you look at the growth of an organization, first off, you have to have a good vision, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's really important that vision is a shared vision, and that you really look within the organization and you tap into those people who can help you shape that vision. So I think first and foremost, you develop the vision. Next, you really need to have a plan of how to execute that. Listen, we all know in our business, clients and people, right? Our own people and clients, that's the most important thing. But those two things don't happen automatically. And so once you have that vision, you have to plan, how am I going to get there? And ultimately, to grow, and this is any position, by the way, this is any growth as a professional. You have to know there's things that only you can do, and there's things that others can do around you. And you have to decide, all right, I need to be able to delegate. And again, that's everything, right? That's if you're going from a technical person to a project manager, if you're going from project manager to a supervisor, you got to know when to say when and when to delegate. Now, part of delegation, quite frankly, is having good people around you that you trust. And luckily, in the past, say 7-8 years, I've been able to develop, work alongside of some incredible professionals. So it makes my life a lot easier. And when it comes time to take this vision, take the plan, the execution plan, and then start to really divvy up responsibilities, I have a really great team at my disposal. And so it makes it a lot easier for me to be able to say, okay, this chunk, you're going to work on this chunk, you're going to work on this, and then vice versa, right? The team then feeds back to you, okay, listen, I agree with this, but John, you got to think about this. You also have to listen, right? So it's a matter of knowing when to delegate, having people around you trust to delegate to, and then knowing when to listen to them and make sure you take their feedback and you implement that. And that's something that it takes time. It's not easy. And I've seen that. I have some folks that, they're just incredible at what they do. They're, especially those who are really incredibly technically competent, to let go of that to other people can be difficult at times. But in order to grow and expand their breadth of responsibilities, they have to do it. And again, that comes down to having a team around you that you've worked with and that you've developed a mutual trust.
Yeah, and I would think that one part too that you mentioned, like when you're at the point where you have to step out, is probably like a kind of over time, it's like it's like a gut feel that over time you get more comfortable with.
Absolutely. And especially with success. So as you've let go and as you not let go, because you never let go, right? You're always maintaining responsibility, and quite honestly, you always have to own it. Things are going to go sideways. I tell people I make decisions every day and I make mistakes every day, but you got to own that, right? And so, and whether the mistake is you personally or it's someone that you've delegated to, you got to own that, and you got to work together and try to not make the same mistake, right? But the time to let go, I think, is when you start to realize you're not expanding. That's really when you got to take a step back and reassess and say, okay, we need to do this. We need to execute on this. What do I have to do? What can only I do? And what can others do with me, alongside me, not for me, but with me. And that's the toughest part, is to know when you hit that point, and to really, again, reflect and say, okay, this is what's got to happen. Quite frankly, a lot of that, Anthony, comes when you have stress points like a COVID situation, or whatever economically we're going into. You start to realize, okay, listen, we got to hunker down. We all have to really focus. I got to do this. Need people to do this. That's kind of forces that reflection, and it forces that assessment of capabilities.
Yeah, right. When you're pushed to the brink of something, it usually is when you really have to get into it. And I think too that having that ability to, when you get to a point where you're looking at that list, like John said, where there's things that only I can do, if that list doesn't get smaller over time, but the company's growing, you probably it's like a red flag. Like, I got to get other people on board that can do some of these things, or else we're just going to be stuck at a certain plateau.
Absolutely. That's exactly right. Look, being at a plateau is okay, right? But at the same time, my personal opinion is growth, not just for the sake of growing, but growth is great for everybody. It's great for everybody's careers. It's a healthy thing to go through. But I can tell you can't grow unless you can delegate. That's the bottom line.
Yeah, for sure. And one last, like, a little
Sure.
analogy here for those of you listening on this. If you're a licensed professional, it's the same idea. If you're a licensed engineer or architect, you're responsible for signing and sealing a plan, but you're not doing A to Z, all the tasks that went into developing that plan, right? So like John said, you're still responsible for things, but you've got to learn who can do what to help you pull that plan set together, and that you're comfortable enough in like signing off on it and owning it, because at the end of the day, you own it.
Yep, responsible charge. Absolutely. That's a great point, Anthony. It's the same thing, right? It's a matter of trust. It's a matter of building your team. That's a big part of it too, though, is you have to help build your team. You have to make sure that trust and that ability to delegate comes along with an understanding that I need to prepare you. It's incumbent upon me as a supervisor or whatever position to help make sure you're in a position to help to bring that value to me. And that's all part of it. And when you're in responsible charge, you got to make sure that you're helping these folks understand the technical requirements of what they're doing, understand the significance of it too, right? I mean, vast majority of what we do as professionals, someone's either going to live in it, they're going to work in it, they're going to be, in that environment every day. And so we have to make sure that we all at all levels understand that responsibility that we have.
Yeah, for sure. So you mentioned before, like a stress points, we had COVID, there's been a lot going on in the last few years. And as someone who's a leader in the firm, or really any leader, your team is going to be looking at you when something happens. And I'm just wondering, from your own perspective, from your experience over the years, the ability not to kind of overreact or necessarily underreact, and kind of in the eyes of everyone, because they are kind of paying attention. How do you handle it, or how have you learned to kind of deal with those situations?
Yeah, so a couple of things. I think one, you really have to have your finger on the pulse of the organization. And I mean that in multiple areas. Not the financial aspects are definitely important, right? You need to have enough reporting and enough information, and frequently enough that you're either anticipating things you need to do, or you're reacting as quickly as possible to changes that occur. Okay, so I think information at your fingertips and understanding how to react to that is incredibly important. And we've developed some really good, I mentioned it before, we have some discipline we brought forward from our prior owner. We have some discipline we've put in place, frankly, again, going back to the 0809, recession, going back to, in this area, Sandy. Sandy was significant to us. And so from those experiences, we really put in place some controls that allow us to quickly monitor where we are financially. The harder part, I think, is the cultural piece to it, and making sure that you're listening, right? And so in the past, especially during COVID, we actually conducted some surveys because we needed real feedback. And what we did is we actually conducted these surveys, and we had someone who went around, and we got about 67%, 2/3 of our company responded to the survey. And the important part of that wasn't just conducting a survey; it's listening to the response and then incorporating that into our planning. And so I think, again, when you talk about volatility, look where we are now, where we were in COVID, and those types of things. The better information you have at your fingertips, the less you will overreact. And quite frankly, look, the reality of what we are as a company is we have really good people, really good leadership, and really good clients. And if you have that, and you have a diversification, you should be in a position to ride out, any of these situations for a period of time. And I actually just had this conversation with our senior management team. We meet, once a month, and we review prior month and where we're going. And we just talked about where we are, and whether we're in a recession, going into a recession. I mean, whatever cycle portion we're in right now, depending on who you talk to and who you listen to, we're bullish. We're bullish on where we are because we're well prepared for it. We have a great diversified practice. We have a phenomenal, in terms of different clients, in terms of the disciplines, geographically, we're gaining ground to stay there. And that breeds, for me, confidence. And it's that confidence that allows you to kind of stay stable, and not to overreact, or, like you said, underreact, right? That's the other side of this thing, is waiting too long to do X. That could be a concern too. But if you have readily available information, both in terms of finance, readily information in terms of your employee base, you can really ride out any of these kind of storms, whichever type it is. And that brings, again, a level of calmness to me and to everyone around you.
Yeah, that's great. And really what I'm hearing, John, from everything you've said so far is, it's the people that you bring on board, the people around you, the team that helps with all of these things, being able to delegate, being able to handle tough situations that, come around, like you said. So that kind of takes us to the next topic, which is, PS&S is growing, no doubt. Like you mentioned before, you're growing geographically, you're growing with more people. And when you grow, now there's more people that you need to focus on in terms of growing them and upskilling them and helping them and supporting them. So talk about your philosophy on just growing your professionals as you grow the firm.
Yeah, no, that's a great question, Anthony. And again, part of this comes from working with you and we really appreciate the relationship we have with you and your team. You've helped us advance our program for development of our employees substantially in the last 12 months. We've changed a lot as a firm. I look back at 2019 versus where we are today. Our mix of work has changed. Our footprint has changed. The types of employees have changed. And so with that, we actually went through a full comprehensive restructuring of our title system. We went through and developed career roadmaps, career pathways for our employees. And what we've really tried to do, I think, is bring more career transparency.
Right.
That's the biggest thing, I think, is that we want our employees to have a sense of where they can go. And cooperatively, we want to do that with the supervisors and, basically every level of the organization, so that we're helping that person steer, and stay on course, if you will. With that, we try to do what we've tried to do. We acknowledge, look, the reality of our business from a financial perspective is we service clients, and with that, our time is predominantly with our clients and delivering work product and just really being a very strong professional. At the same time, though, as an organization, we realize in order to grow, right, we're big on, I really like to promote from within as best we can. And in order for those individuals to grow, they need certain amount of training, right? They need learning and development opportunities. And so what we try to do is we're trying to marry up these career paths with learning and development opportunities. So you have, as an employee, you really have a lot more control over, you have transparency so you can see where you can go. And then you have more control over how to stay on that path. The reality is we want to grow to create more opportunities, right? That's what this does. Growth, it creates more opportunities for the employees to grow. And by the way, employees are very different. We have different paths here. We have technical paths, we have project management paths, we have managerial and leadership paths. In order to really grow a successful organization, you need everybody, right? You need a little bit of everything. And each person gravitates to a different area. And that can even change over time. I know personally, I started out as a field guy, and then I went into project management, and then I went more into the senior leadership side of the company. And at each stage, I had to learn new skills, there's different, like I said before, I didn't learn business from the books or from any kind of program. You learn it along the way. And so what we're trying to do is take that philosophy and actually create a more cohesive system to help that person grow in the organization. Ultimately, again, what are we? Again, I hate to use the term assets, but the reality is that's our greatest assets are our people. And so if we're not helping them grow, if we're not helping them along the way with the path, we're kind of, that's not living up to our side of the bargain, if you will.
Yeah, for sure. No, and just for context, EMI, we worked a lot with PS&S on some of these things, like John said, the title restructures, career road mapping, pathways. And I think John said an important word earlier, like transparency, or you could say clarity, because at the end of the day, like your leadership team may have all these great ideas, like, hey, we want to promote people, there's technical, there's managerial, but if they don't know that, like they're sitting at their desk or they're working and they're just thinking like, where am I headed here? And kind of like, the vision that I like to use, and I think I used this with John and his leadership team when we started, was they're going to be like they're rowing in a canoe in a fog. Like, you expect them to come to work every day and row, but if they don't know kind of where they're going, they maybe can't be as passionate and work or move as fast as you want them to. And so once you show them like, hey, we've got all these opportunities, like John said, you can go into the field early in your career, you can become a design professional and then pursue your license, you could, get out in the field more and advance in that range. It just shows people, hey, this is great. And then, as John said, you're going to show them the path and you're going to support them along the path, whether it's learning and development programs or mentoring. Hey, come to this meeting with me because I want to get you into that right path and track like that. And so, those are the things that I think, unfortunately, when we live in a world where companies are growing so fast, it can be easy to not do those things just because you're busy. It's not because you don't neglecting people, but you're busy. So it's good when you see firms like PS&S that say, hey, this year we need to really stop, get focused on this and create these roadmaps. And, listen, it's not a thing that happens overnight, but it's a long process, but it has to start somewhere. and every step on the process provides something better, right? Like,
Right.
hey, we've got the first thing with these initial career roadmaps. They've got more clarity than they had 2 months ago, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And we're still rolling it out. To your point, Anthony, I mean, it doesn't happen like that. And that's, look, any change, I don't care how big or small the organization is, nothing happens quickly. And I think one of the things you have to do is realize people will likely take a wait and see attitude, right? And so
Mhm.
you have to make sure that when you roll out programs, there's the follow through. And so that's another important part of anything you do within an organization. And so we're in that process, right? We're still in an ongoing process to make sure what we've professed and what we've put out there, we're going to stand behind it because it's important. And again, to roll the clock back a few minutes here, you talked about delegation. And I said, most important thing is you got to have people around you to delegate to that you trust. And so unless we're offering these kinds of opportunities, unless we're helping build our teams, we're not going to have that at our disposal when we need to grow and to stretch and to have people, let go of something. You gotta be developing that next group
Yeah.
in order to have that base and support as you move up.
Yeah. And one thing I'll add to this too is that, it's there's kind of two sides to the street here. So you, as in, let's say, an AEC professional listening out there, if your company does go ahead and provide these things, which is great, you have to take ownership of these things as
Yep.
well. You got to engage with the programs that are offered. You got to, build the skills and practice them. It's not like, hey, I got a program for my company, I'm going to get promoted now. So it's really got to be like a working relationship in two ways. Both people, company needs to offer it, and the employees need to step up and take advantage of it.
I completely agree with that. Take advantage of what's available to you. And if it's not made available to you, you got to take a step back and breathe, and figure out how it can become available to you. But to any professional, I'll just use as a simple example. We have folks maybe that didn't get their FE or got their FE and they're not pursuing their PE and things like that. Again, that's not for everybody. I get it. But if it's available to you, why not?
Right.
What is it about that you're not progressing? That's a simple example. You gone through all the education, you did all that. Why aren't you trying to get that next step? Same thing when it comes to your career path. So why aren't you asking where my career path is? Why aren't you wondering what's it going to take for me to get to that next level? You should ask those questions. Once you get that information, it's really up to you to follow through.
Right.
That concept of ownership. I want you to progress as an employee. We want to give you these opportunities, but ultimately, some of this has to come back on you. You have to own it. I mentioned to you earlier, in order to progress my career, I went to school at night and I worked during the day, and that was something I chose to do because I thought it was great for me to advance my technical. Big commitment, that's something that I had to commit to, impacts your lifestyle, etc. And I'm not saying you have to do that, but you got to own it. If you have a vision of where you want to be,
Yeah.
figure out the path, and then you got to own how to get there.
Yeah.
And look, people around in our company, we're here to help, but you gotta want to do it yourself too.
Yeah. You got to step up for sure.
Absolutely.
All right. I just got a couple of last questions here
Sure.
that I
Sure.
usually get from consulting professionals. And so let's say you have consulting professionals out there, they're up and coming in their career. Maybe they're like transitioning into management for the first time, or new managers. What would you say from everything you've seen is, one or a few of the most important kind of traits or
Yeah.
skills that you see in consulting professionals?
So, I think right out of the gate, you got to be a strong technical professional. You have to understand your job. And quite frankly, you got to understand how it impacts those around you. I mentioned earlier, we're a multidiscipline firm. And so, being an engineer here, you're typically working on a project team, possibly with an architect, with an environmental scientist, with a surveyor. Not that you have to know everything about them, but you have to know what they struggle with every day. And so you can help them do their job better. So be a great technical professional in your area and then have an open mind to understand what those around you are dealing with. Similarly, respect. One of the big things we profess here is you don't have to be friends with everybody in my company, okay? But you're going to respect everybody in my company. You're going to respect them as a professional, as a person. That's first and foremost. So if you want to grow in any professional organization, you got to respect those around you and respect what they're dealing with. Okay. Again, don't have to love everybody, but you got to respect them.
Hmm.
I think the most, but if you ask me, one of the most important things is good communication skills. That's verbal and written, by the way.
Okay.
In our profession, listen. I talk to a lot of undergraduate students in engineering, and they ask me the same question. And my first thing is, did you take a writing course?
Right.
I don't care. You need to be able to communicate. And nowadays, especially when so much is in emails, unfortunately, a lot of stuff gets done in texts.
Yeah.
It's not just the report writing; it's the ability to communicate. It's so important, right? So written communications, if you're not good at it, find a technical writing course and go to it. Again, help yourself. But the communication is again interpersonal skills and the ability to communicate. You need it with your employees. You need it if you're a supervisor. You need it with your clients. You need to be able to interact and communicate, every day.
Mm.
And one of the things I would encourage, we've gone to a flexible work environment, and we're in a mode where we're working with our employees, those that wish to not necessarily be in the office every day. And one of the things I'm encouraging everybody is you want to be around your peers, you want to be around other professionals, you
Sure.
want to be able to communicate with them. And it's amazing. I really find this is great. The fact that you and I can do this right now, I think is phenomenal. But you and I have also spent a lot of time in person over the last year.
Yeah.
And the relationship we developed in person allows us to communicate the way we are now. And it's a lot easier, right?
Yep.
It's the same thing with your co-workers. You got to be able to have a certain amount of time together in person, interacting, in order for these types of online interactions to be meaningful. So if you're, an up and comer, whatever level, 5, 10 years of experience, I encourage you, make sure you take the time to be around the other employees, both physically and electronically on a go forward basis. There's so much I've learned in my career through osmosis, right? And, I had one of the greatest opportunities. My dad was phenomenal. He was an incredible professional. And I can't tell you exactly what I learned from him, but I know being around him, going to events, just I absorbed so much, just how
Yeah.
he interacted with people, how he managed a room or worked the room. I love that saying. I learned that because I was around him. You can't do that. I could never have done that online or something along those lines. So I encourage everybody, embrace flexibility, but don't ever lose sight of the import of being in person and interacting with other people in person.
No, that's great. I mean, I think two key takeaways are that last one is critically important. I've had the same experiences in my career. Anytime I get the chance to sit down at the table next to somebody, like I feel like in fact,
Yeah.
I think it was just a couple months ago, I went to the ACC conference. I happened to see John there. We got to
Yep.
talk a little bit, but I just got to see so many people that haven't seen in so long. And the
Yeah.
energy that you get from that and the relationship that you build from that is really unparalleled. I mean, you can't pick it up online, but like John
Agreed.
said, you can keep it up online, but you can't get that energy. So that's important. I think going back to what John said about the written skills, I think a lot of professionals today, when you say the word communication, they immediately think of speaking or talking. So I think it's important that we reinforce, especially in the world of, architecture, engineering, construction. There are a lot of reports, there are a lot of emails that happen, and you need to be able to communicate in both ways. And that is really important because
Yep.
the things you write to someone in an email to a client could mean whether or not they hire you again, quite frankly, right?
Yep.
So that's super critical. So last one that I have for you, John, is I get this question a lot from consulting professionals. Like, how can I make sure that I'm really adding value to my organization? What would you say to
Yeah.
someone who asks that?
Here's what I think. And again, any professional, any organization, regardless of the nature of what you do and who you service, we as an industry, right? There's three main things that we stress in our organization, right? Managerial excellence, technical excellence, business development excellence. And what I can tell you is this: if you want to be well-rounded as a professional, you want to bring value, embrace all three, right? We
Mm.
call them our three pillars, right? Mr. Paulus was the managerial excellence. S. Sokolowski, he was the technical excellence, and the last S, my dad, not me, was the business development excellence, right? And so we built a program around that. We built training around that because we believe those three legs of the stool. That's that milk stool concept. You need all three, and so. And when I say business development too, people sometimes, it's funny, I think a lot of engineers in particular, technical is a no-brainer, right? You get it, you know what you need to do, you know what you can progress. Managerial, some people love it, some people are like, but most people get it. Business development, I think, is probably the one that's a little scary to people. The best business development is repeat business. We,
Yeah. Oh,
we
yeah.
work on a 87+% repeat business basis. You do a damn good job. You communicate with your client. You build a relationship. Guess what? You're going to get that next phone call. You need to be able to understand that and make sure that you're doing that. So, in my opinion, try to be as you build skills that are broad. Even again, focus on that technical excellence, but understand the managerial side, understand mentoring, right? Managerial could just be simply mentoring. You need to, as you're growing your career, you need to mentor that brand new undergraduate or that 1 or 2 year person. That's part of it. That's part of embracing and helping somebody else advance their career. So that's what I would say is really embrace the 3 pillars, be well-rounded, and understand that. And again, I go back to respect what others do around you, right?
Sure.
So certain people are going to gravitate to any one of those pillars, and understand how important each pillar is to the organization and to your own success, and make sure you respect what they do, and how, don't take it for granted that their job might seem easier. It doesn't. None of those 3 pillars is easy. I can promise you that.
Yeah, and I think that point about business development is so important. Repeat work. I mean, I talk to project managers all the time, telling me like, I don't do business development. I'm like, you're doing it every day.
Absolutely.
Right? You're doing it every single day when you communicate with your client, when you give them reports, when you get their projects done on time. They're going to come back to you again for more. And you're probably doing more business development sometimes than business development people, because
absolutely, Anthony. I totally agree with you, man. That's absolutely right.
So that's really important. And I think the other thing real quick that I want to just hit on from what John said is, a lot of times in consulting firms, you'll hear people talk about like this fork in the road where it's like, hey, technical management, right? But I think like regardless of which road you go down, like John said, you can still understand the other aspects. So I think some of the best technical professionals that I've worked with understand what their managers' responsibilities are and what they have to accomplish, so they could be a really good, technical member. You may not be a manager yourself, but you can understand it. And on the flip side, I've seen some managers that haven't been able to be that effective because they don't understand technically what their team members are doing, right? So I think you can be well-rounded even if you're staying in one of those different disciplines. It's just understanding the different aspects of your firm and how it works, essentially.
Yep. And that's, quite honestly, that's a big part of our progression here. We want you, as you progress your career. And again, I go back to that, the utilization and all that, the good metrics. We expect you to have some of that time that you're not, that you're not working on projects dedicated to growing each of those pillars. That's what we want you to do. And that's what I go back to, that career transparency. Because look, things change, right? You're coming out as an undergrad and you have an idea where you might want to be. 5 years in, you have another idea. And again, that happened to me, right? 7 years in, I'm like, I love the field. I just loved it. It was great. And I realized, wow, project management's kind of cool. And I did that for a bunch of years. And quite honestly, I went into the management side, and the probably my least favorite. I miss the technical stuff. But putting that aside, my point is, you change, right, as your career progresses. And so you want to be able to grow and to have opportunity in various areas. But along the way, you got to develop skills. You can't get to you can, but to progress at a nice pace, you really want to develop those skills as you go along in each of those 3 pillars, so that when you finally, or when you get to a point, you say, man, I really want to be there, you're positioned for it, and you've developed what you need to be successful in that position.
For sure. Well, listen, John, I want to thank you so much for spending some time with us here on the Civil Engineering CEO. I wish you and PS&S all the best in your continued growth.
Anthony, thank you so much for the time today, man. It had a lot of fun. Good to see you.
I hope you enjoyed my conversation with John. He is an excellent engineer and an excellent leader. I've had the chance to work with him a lot. And that whole thing that he talked about with regards to delegation, I promise you, if you focus on that in your career, it will help you to become an awesome leader. Please consider subscribing to our YouTube channel here. We put out videos like this on a weekly basis to help engineering professionals become better managers and leaders. I look forward to seeing you next week here on the EMI's YouTube channel.